A camping nightmare. Although I've always enjoyed camping, my most recent trip into the wild has completely altered the way I view things. I had been looking forward to a weekend in the middle of nature, far from the noise and bustle of the city, with my friend Alex for weeks as we planned this trip. We set up our tents as soon as we got to the campsite in the morning and started exploring. The sun's rays filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. There was a light breeze and the birds were chirping. The area's natural beauty and crisp air rejuvenated us. We were eager to settle down and prepare dinner by the end of the day, after a day of hiking, fishing, and exploration. We were talking and roasting marshmallows around the campfire when we heard an odd noise off in the distance. Deep inside the forest, there was a sound like twigs breaking. We both exchanged glances with each other as we contemplated our options. Since we were aware that there were wild animals nearby, we were wary of taking any chances. However, the noise eventually died down. We decided to ignore it and carry on with our evening as usual because we thought it was a small, harmless animal. The night dragged on, and the woods grew eerily quiet. There was nothing but the sporadic crackles of the fire and the wind rustling the leaves. Unexpectedly, the noise started up again, but this time it was much closer. Adrenaline immediately began to flow through our veins as we both leapt to our feet. We began illuminating the area where the noise was coming from after Alex retrieved a flashlight. Next, we located him. Standing between the trees and keeping watch over us was a tall, shadowy figure. We were unable to discern any details, but we could tell that he wasn't amicable. He was big, silent, and overly intimidating. We did nothing but stand motionless. We had nothing to shield us other than our wits, so we were totally defenseless. The figure then immediately disappeared into the woods. We were left reeling, terrified, and unsure of what to make of what we had just witnessed. Huddling inside our tents, we made an effort to fall asleep, but every sound woke us up. Our safety and the possibility of anything waiting outside were both unknown to us. The horrifying outcomes that could come from this man's actions kept us awake that night, making it impossible for us to fall asleep. We believe he was still there, as best we could tell. We packed hastily the next morning, having decided to end our trip early. We didn't want to run the risk of running into the guy again. Some of our supplies were missing, which we discovered as we were packing. Our equipment had vanished. Our food and water supplies had been tampered with. We were so confused that we might have missed other, more significant items that he took. The man had been keeping an eye on us and lurking around our campsite while we slept for a while, we realized. We were indignant and horrified. We wanted to get out of there as soon as we could, but we also wanted to find the stalker or stalkers. We discovered some tracks and broken branches as we surveyed the area of our campsite. From behind the trees, it appeared that someone had been watching us. We came across a small wooden cabin as we traveled further along the tracks through the forest. Probably for more than 50 years it remained there. It had rickety doors and damaged windows and was outdated and dilapidated. We were so intrigued that after a brief hesitation, we cautiously walked up to the cabin. A dim, musty interior was visible when the door creaked open. When we arrived, our worst fears came true. Hunting knives, strange objects, and animal remains were all over the cabin. There was no doubt about it. Whoever lived here would not make a good neighbor. Our security was in jeopardy. We knew the man had returned the moment we heard a noise coming from outside. Our situation was precarious. While trying to escape, we discovered that the door was locked and the windows were too small. We realized we had run out of time when we heard the man approaching. We attempted to escape by kicking open a window in a last-ditch effort. Despite our best efforts, the man followed us as we ran. Behind us, he was moving slowly and exhaling heavily. We were escaping for our very lives. By the time we returned to the campsite, our bodies were shaking and our hearts were racing. We quickly collected our belongings and left the forest. We didn't return. We're still unsure of who or why he was pursuing us in the woods. Only that we are alive today is all we can say about our luck. We will never forget the spooky moment we came across this threatening man in the woods. Missing things. I recently had a shocking experience that still gives me the chills to this day. It occurred on January 21st, 2023, in the late afternoon while Roy and I were camping at a quiet location close to a gorgeous lake. We had no idea that our relaxing vacation would develop into a terrifying encounter with the unknown. Come together as I tell you about my terrifying camping experience. The atmosphere was ideal as we set up camp. We were surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature. However, there was a strange thing that started to annoy us, a whispered voice pleading for our attention. The voice was barely audible, almost like someone was whispering, but it persisted. I tried to brush it off at first, but Roy and I exchanged worried looks. We reasoned that it was probably just our imagination or the wind playing tricks on us. But the more we chose to ignore it, the more anxious we became. We made a point of preparing a hearty meal and indulging in a few drinks as we determined to enjoy our camping trip. But the eerie noises continued, gnawing at our senses. Roy abruptly excused himself and left our campsites to go outside to relieve himself. As the minutes grew into an agonizing 15, my concerns increased. Unsure of where Roy had disappeared to, I anxiously called out for him. I grabbed a flashlight and started searching, desperately trying to call him on his phone. My efforts were thwarted by the dreaded lack of signal in that isolated location. My flashlight's beam was cutting through the pitch black as I stood alone in it, my heart pumping in my chest. I yelled, "Roy!" with a mix of worry and dread in my voice. My only reply, which echoed eerily through the quiet night, was silence. The terrifying possibilities rushed through my mind. I felt a panic well up inside me, threatening to consume every thought, wondering if he had been in some sort of an accident or got lost in the wilderness. In vain, I attempted to reach him by calling his number. I was able to reach Roy's phone on my way back to the campsite. With every ring, the tension increased. But just as hopelessness was about to set in, a faint voice could be heard over the receiver. I felt a wave of relief that momentarily overcame my prevailing fear. My voice trembled as I said, "Bro, I'm so glad you're okay. Been so worried. Where are you? And why did you leave the campsite?" On the other hand, his response made my spine tingle. He asked with apparent confusion, "What, bro? Are you drunk? Today is the anniversary of my parents' wedding, but I've never gone camping with you. Where are you? And are you okay?" My mind was having a hard time understanding what he was saying as my heart was racing. There was a serious problem. After hanging up, I quickly looked around the campsite and saw that there were two tents there, mine and what I assumed to be Roy's, but the latter was in bad shape. The tent was worn out and smelled strangely. It made my stomach turn. I hastily gathered my belongings and fled for home. Overcome with panic and an unexplainable sense of dread, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something evil had happened, something that was beyond my ability to understand. I was plagued by the idea of going back there, but I couldn't help but be curious. The next morning, we returned to the camping area, armed with courage and joined by Roy and a few friends, hoping to solve the mysteries that had beset us. We were shocked to discover that only my belongings were still there, with no sign of Roy's or the second tent. He seemed to have vanished completely. We still don't have a good reason for what happened that eerie night, or an explanation. The uncertainty gnaws at our souls, leaving us with more questions than answers. Was it an elaborate prank, or did we unwittingly stumble into the realm of horror? The memory of that terrifying camping trip followed me around relentlessly as the days passed into weeks and then into months. I was troubled by the unresolved issues and Roy's mysterious disappearance. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to what happened that evening than could be explained by logic. I dove into the research process, looking for any data that might help explain what transpired to us. I browsed forums and the internet for reports of strange events that had happened in far-off places. Reading countless of them, we soon realized that our unsettling encounter was not unique to us. The pages of these accounts were filled with tales of missing people, strange occurrences, and close encounters with the paranormal. I searched for a solid explanation for our ordeal, but I couldn't find one. I was left with a gap in my knowledge of the world because the incident was never fully explained. My perception of the mysteries and hidden dimensions that exist beyond our comprehension has changed as a result of the experience.